Hello again. My name is Jubi Arriola-Headley, and I'm with the Municipal Waste Management Association, or MWMA. We're really pleased you could join us today for our Ask Experts series. Today's topic, everything you wanted to know about recycling. What we here at MWMA try to do is present educational and professional development opportunities for the folks in cities and counties and municipal governments who are decision makers in the areas of solid waste and recycling and sustainability. And so when we had a conversation with the Glass Recycling Coalition about this, we learned that there were a lot of things we didn't know, and that everything you read might not reflect the full universe or reality of what glass recycling is right now. But at the same time, we've heard from so many of you how important an issue it is and how challenging an issue it is right now. So we wanted to bring you this opportunity to learn a little bit more about glass recycling. Like I said, we are co-sponsoring this webinar today with the Glass Recycling Coalition and Renew, a proactive, positive voice for future-facing recycling. You can learn more about Renew at renewpartnershipportal.com, and I'm betting somebody's going to put a link in the chat for that. And you can, at your leisure, pass this webinar, take a look and learn more about that partnership and that initiative. So before we jump in today, I just want to cover a few housekeeping rules. First of all, we're not any of us new to Zoom at this point, so you're probably not surprised that we're all muted. And even if it became an option to unmute, we'd ask you to stay muted. We're going to ask that for today's purposes, you use the chat to submit any questions you have. And while I have you, let me first say thank you to everybody when they registered who submitted questions in advance. We got so many of them. We're going to try to get to all of them. But part B of that is also, please put your chat questions in the chat, because even if we aren't able in our hour today to get to those questions, all of our panelists have committed to being available to answer questions beyond the scope of this webinar. So the chat's how we'll capture questions that you have that maybe we don't get to. So please make sure you put those in there. And finally, just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and we're going to be able to share that afterwards. So not only if you want to go back and revisit some aspect of the webinar to learn more or listen more intently, or if you want to share it with colleagues, etc., this webinar is going to be available afterwards, and we will make sure those links are available so you know where we make it available. So that's everything I have for housekeeping. We have a wonderful, very educated, very learned and experienced panel today. But before we introduce them, we want to take the temperature of the folks who are part of our webinar today. And it's a lot of you, a whole lot of you. So we have a poll question, and they're only going to be two, and they're very simple. The first one is, could not be simpler. If you could describe glass recycling in one word, what would that word be? There's a link in the chat that you can use to answer that poll so that we can see, and we're going to give you a few seconds to answer that question. It can be any word you can think of that you would share in a recorded webinar. So I'm looking forward to seeing what those words are. Awesome. That is a wonderful word. Underappreciated, expensive. I'm loving some of these words that are coming through already. Local, possible. One of the interesting things, dismal. Okay. Everything you want to know about glass recycling has built into it. Essential, I see as another word, has built into it a look at what the real landscape of glass recycling is today. So one of the things we're hoping to do, and I've had conversations with all of our panelists about this, is dispel some myths. So it'll be interesting to see at the end of the webinar. We're open, of course, to your feedback, whether or not you feel like some of those myths have been dispelled. Complicated. I saw underappreciated, non-existent. Okay, so underutilized, confusing. We've got some work to do in our hour. That is very clear. So maybe what we want to do now is introduce our panelists. Like I said, we've got a wonderful panel today, and you're going to hear from everyone left to right in this order. How we want to structure this is that we're going to hear from our panelists, and then we're going to answer some of the questions we got in advance, and then we're going to tackle some of those questions in the chat. So with us today, we've got Scott DeFife from the Glass Recycling Institute, and Ben Pedigo from Rumpke Recycling, Laura Hennemann from Strategic Materials Incorporated, and Bob Hippert from OI Glass. And like I said, we're going to hear from each panelist. They're going to tell you a little bit about who they are and also what they do, where they are in the glass recycling chain. And then we're going to get into it and really start to unpack some of these myths and maybe straighten some things out. So Scott, let me throw it to you. Thanks for joining us here today. Glass Packaging Institute.
Thank you very much.
So sorry I got that wrong.
That's okay, Jubi. I answer to a whole bunch of different organizations these days. Thanks for having us. And we're very proud to work with MWMA and Renew in bringing this forward. It really does seem like we have a good topic for conversation to see if we can help dispel some myths and do some education on glass recycling. I am Scott DeFife. I am the president of the Glass Packaging Institute. That's the day job that pays the bills. GPI is the trade association of the glass container manufacturing industry, and all of our supply chain members that provide the raw materials that go into making glass bottles and jars, plus all of the labels, caps, closures, and the recycling of glass, because recycled glass is a key component of making new bottles and jars. So if we go forward, in addition, I work with the Glass Recycling Coalition on the leadership committee, and also the Glass Recycling Foundation, which we'll talk about probably at some point during the hour, to help communities expand their glass recycling. You know, one of the first things that I like to do in any of the webinars where we talk about glass recycling, because we so often hear, and I am so often chasing down stories about there's no markets for glass in XYZ community or something of that nature. And I like to start with a map. This is a map of the US glass infrastructure. On this map, we have glass manufacturers in the teal blue, lighter blue, glass recycling processors in the golden yellow, and fiberglass plants. We do not represent fiberglass ourselves, but we work a lot with the fiberglass industry, and they are another user of recycled glass, and often the container plants and the fiberglass plants kind of work together to use the recycled glass due to color, markets and things of that nature. And so we like to include their locations on the map to show there are markets for glass in most states in the country, and certainly in higher concentrations east of the Mississippi, up and down the Central Plains, and definitely on the West Coast. I'll just, the green states, the ones that are kind of shaded in, are just how I keep track of conversations that we're having just this year alone, in 2021 alone, with state regulators or state recycling organizations about improving glass recycling in that state. There's a couple more states that after next week will probably pop green, and these conversations are happening, all the time. Part of that is due to a report that we released in April, where we spent most of last year, the entire industry spent most of last year studying our supply chains and how to meet the new US national goals of recycling rates for all materials of 50%, 50 by 30 that US EPA has worked on. And we want to get the national recycling rate for glass up to 50%. But in addition, the glass container manufacturer would like to get the average recycled content of bottles made in North America up to 50% as well. And so a lot of that has spurred a lot of conversations with states. Another one of the key things that I like to lay out at the very beginning is what do we call glass? What we call glass and what somebody else calls glass, what you may in the waste management industry hear of as glass, is likely to look more like that picture on my left as I'm looking at the screen. When I really zoom in on that, that's MRF glass. That is what a lot of people are shipping to Strategic Materials or to, not Rumpke's facilities necessarily, but another facility that is not as robust in its glass processing as Rumpke is. That's MRF glass. And, in a MRF, a material recovery facility, the glass line is a negative sort. So everything else is coming out as a positive sort. You're pulling out the aluminum, you're pulling out the paper, you're pulling out the PET and things of that nature. What's left in the glass pile is pretty close to the next to the last step before you get the residual contamination that may go into a landfill. And so when I see things about market price for glass, and I said, well, what's your glass look like? Does it look like this picture on this side, or does it look like this other picture where I can clearly tell that those are glass bottles, right? So that's drop-off glass or bottle bill glass. It's all glass. Maybe there's a cap or two, but you can tell it's glass, right? 95, 98% glass, maybe 50% glass if you can find a bottle in there, right? So quality matters. Quality matters directly to value of the commodity. And a lot of what we need to do, and in our study, is figured out how to get more of the glass looking like the one side than the other side. Not necessarily saying that we need to have bottle bills everywhere, but there's many steps that you can take to clean up what the glass stream looks like to make it of higher value and to increase the yield that comes out of the end of the process. Also, on our website, we've done a lot of work to kind of gather in all the questions that we get about how does the whole system work? I don't understand. What's cullet? What's a MRF? Things of that nature. We get these questions all the time. What is processing? And so up on our GPI website, we've got a couple guides that are downloadable PDFs, very basics, quick study on glass recycling. In addition, through all the conversations that we've been having with municipal leaders, solid waste managers, budget directors for counties, people that have engaged with us on trying to help them solve their glass issue, we've started to look and kind of catalog some key questions that we think municipal leaders should be asking or could be asking about glass before they take any drastic steps. I don't think anybody on the webinar is going to be surprised that there are some real stories out there in the past couple of years of communities that were forced to drop glass or put in a position where they felt that they needed to drop glass. In many instances, that's not necessarily the fault of the glass or the glass market. It's merely a weight issue, or it's a bad contract issue, or maybe there's an exclusivity clause in there that's keeping you from being able to do everything that you could possibly do with the glass that's coming into your stream. And so all of these issues, collection, quantity, end markets, administration, contract management, and questions of that nature are on this 2-page sheet for questions municipal recycling leaders should ask about glass recycling. And these are both on our GPI website and available to anybody to download and use. Most importantly, like today's session, we're really hoping that municipal leaders will engage with the industry. The industry, our industry, the fiberglass industry, the solid waste management industry that cares to recycle glass is very dedicated to it. The industry wants more of it. There are end markets, and we understand that we need to work with cities to help them through the struggles. We understand the issues, the budget issues, and the programmatic issues that cities have, and we want to help them preserve glass recycling in its best form across the country. I think I pitch it over to Ben. So Ben Pedigo with Rumpke is next.
Okay, Scott, thank you so much. I just am honored to be part of this discussion, and what a wonderful forum. My name is Ben Pedigo, and I am the corporate operations coordinator for Rumpke. And I want to tell you a little bit about Rumpke. The Rumpke family, it's an American success story. It's just a classic. Bill and Catherine Rumpke during the Great Depression trying to figure out how to survive. And Bill has a coal delivery business, and nobody has any money. And so the Rumpkes start bartering. And in that process, Jubi, they started to get pigs, and came up with an idea of picking up food scraps. And this is in Cincinnati, in Carthage, Ohio, right outside of Cincinnati in 1932. And they start employing their cousins, their nieces and nephews. And now fast forward to 2021, great granddaughters, great grandsons, granddaughters and grandsons involved in this. The Rumpke family is very much involved in this. And Jubi, I bring that out because they're entrepreneurs. And I think they found out very early that how significant recycling is as a component to their business. Rumpke is one of the largest privately owned waste and recycling businesses in the United States. So it's a neat story. And I'll kind of get in and talk a little bit on the glass side. So what we're seeing here on the screen is a MRF, a new MRF with the technology, with the optical sorting capabilities. And new MRFs will look at glass, and they will divert glass very quickly in the system. And new MRFs should have some type of a pre-clean system. Now, Rumpke has partnered with Machinex down through the years, very innovative recycling equipment provider, to put together cleaning systems to prepare that glass to go to the final cleaning. And Jubi, just as an analogy, you know, we separate paper in the new MRFs, maybe optically, or maybe it's manually, but we're removing contaminants from paper. And it's a similar analogy with glass. However, just the nature of glass, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it's so infinitely recyclable. It's such a neat package that and our customers demand that glass be recycled. So that MRF, the MRF of today or the MRF of tomorrow, needs to divert that glass very quickly in the process. And then there has to be some type of a cleaning system. Rumpke has been very fortunate, corporate office in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, very supportive of recycling, and grants were made available to Rumpke to provide innovative glass cleanup systems. In fact, I think in 2015, Jubi, Rumpke partnered with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in the city of Dayton to come up with a hybrid cleaning system that was provided by Machinex that would be a retrofit that could be put on an existing MRF, basically, anywhere in the country, and for that cleaning process. So those are two very, very key components, because very strict parameters, and Laura Hennemann, she'll be going over those the parameters on handling that material. This is a shot of the second component. Rumpke, very innovative, because we're the only landfill operator and recycler in the United States that has a cleanup system, Jubi. So this is the system that we have in place. It was about 2002, 2003, Rumpke realized that we had to become vertically integrated in this particular component of recycling reclamation because it was essential for us to have a stable market. What you see on the top left is Scott. That's that 3-mix MRF glass that we've been talking about. On the right, you get a shot of the recycling facility. Very innovative facility. This is Bender equipment from Austria, and a very neat system. And down below, you've got you have one of a number of optical sorters that this was from a grant provided by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Basically, our plant is providing 2 streams. We're providing fine grind to the fiberglass industry. Johns Manville is a partner in the Midwest, Defiance, Ohio, Richmond, Indiana. And then the bottle glass component where the optics come in, Jubi, and then you'll see the conveying system separating amber from clear. That flint glass and amber is going to be going to Owens, Illinois. Very good helper and partner in this. The silo that you see in the middle is what we use to house the fine grind prior to going to the fiberglass industry. You know, consumers want this, and I want to encourage, Jubi, the people that are on this webinar. We need to recycle glass and significant diversion from the landfills. And Jubi, I'll just end my my talk just by a question. Don't things taste better? They taste great in glass containers. I think that's it. Laura, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And yes, I do think they taste better in glass. To answer your question, I'll jump in. So I work for Strategic Materials. Some know us as SMI. I see some familiar names in the attendees list, so you'll probably hear some things that you already know. But for those that aren't familiar with the company, we're the largest glass recycler in North America. We operate in about 50 locations in 3 countries, primarily the US, but also in Canada and Mexico. We recycle about 3 million tons of glass a year. And we've been in business for 125 years. So we've been doing it for a very long time. Something that I recently learned for company history is we actually began life in Ohio, and we started business as a key partner to GE, or General Electric, to recycle light bulb glass. So that's a little bit about the company and where we operate. And I've got just a couple slides we'll go through. So first of all, does anybody know what cullet means that's not a panelist? This is something that it's one of those questions we get to that it's, what are you saying exactly? Are you saying cutlet or cullet, or what are you saying? All cullet means is it's not only recycled broken glass, but it's also furnace ready. So it's meeting specifications to be remelted. That's when we refer to cullet, that's all it is. And why is cullet used? It saves energy, it melts at a lower temperature than virgin material. So it not only displaces virgin material, but it melts at a lower temperature, which saves energy and also lowers CO2 emissions. So that's really important when it comes to manufacturing, especially in certain states where there are certain air emission controls in place. Helps keep a cleaner environment and also supports jobs. The other thing I will mention that I don't believe is on here in detail is because recycled content or recycled glass melts at that lower temperature, it also helps with the furnaces. So furnaces that are remelting and making new products, it's not running as hot, which means it's not running as hard, which can reduce maintenance and also potentially lengthen the life of those furnaces and those equipment, which is very expensive. So there's a lot of benefit to using recycled glass in the production of new products. So did want to go through this, especially for some on the call that might be a little unfamiliar with the process of how glass moves. So starting in the very top where you see people cheersing and glass, those are what we call the consumer or the resident, and they're enjoying their glass packaged products. And once they're done with the products inside or the contents inside, typically they're going to put them in their curbside recycling bin. For some communities, they're going to go into a drop-off program, but either way, it's going to be picked up. In this case, it's Rumpke. So Ben just presented, and we're going in the order in which we are moving through this process as best we can. But it's picked up, it's processed at the MRF or a material recovery facility. And from there, the glass pile, sometimes looks more like glass than others, like Scott mentioned, comes to a secondary processor or a recycler, and that's Strategic Materials is the example today, that's me. And then moving through the process, we get it into cullet format. So it's ready to go back into the furnace most times. And the primary markets are back into glass container manufacturing, which is OI, which is Bob, who's going to present next. Or it will go into fiberglass insulation. That is another huge market for us, that it's got the same benefits back into container. And the example here is Owens Corning. I think a lot of people know Pink Panther and the pink insulation. But continuing on the container side, usually the bottles are made, but they're filled elsewhere. They're filled by a brand or a fulfillment center. So your favorite brands that come in glass, and then it goes back onto the shelf. That all takes place, that whole process of not really counting drop-off programs, because it can be even quicker with drop-off programs because you're essentially missing a step. It'll bypass the MRF, it'll come directly to the processor. The secondary processor is no longer secondary, but that all takes place less than 30 days. So that's what we like to refer to as the circular economy of glass. Glass can be recycled forever, 100%, so one bottle in, one bottle out. Some other materials will degrade as they're recycled over and over. I think plastics are anywhere from 6 to 7 times. Aluminum is something similar, maybe a little bit more, but glass is 100% forever. So that's why glass is important to the economy. So did want to talk a little bit about myths. And I think we debunked our first one with the question in the chat. So thank you for sending that through, because that's not one that I don't think we had included, but caps and labels are okay to have on your bottles when you're recycling. In fact, if they are recyclable caps, we'll recover them and recycle them. Or somebody like Ben and Rumpke will also recover those caps. But first one, broken glass cannot be accepted. This isn't true. As part of our process, we crush glass. So broken glass is fine by us. We do understand that there are some that maybe don't have automatic arms to pick up the 96-gallon bins. And so therefore for the safety of their employees, they ask for not broken glass to be in there. But it's perfectly acceptable as long as it's not the size of sand. We still need to be able to color sort it. So broken glass is just fine when it comes to us, and probably Rumpke would agree with that. Next myth is mixed color glass cannot be accepted. It's not true. We have optical sortation to color sort the glass. Sometimes, depending on a variety of factors, we color sorted glass would be worth a little bit more in terms of value. So sometimes communities will opt to do that, but they're not required to. It just becomes like a financial play. Glass must be washed and cleaned. Sure, please give it a rinse. We would love that, but it doesn't present an issue for us. It can cause odor issues. So when you think about the people that are doing the jobs of recycling and recycling glass, it's just kind of courtesy rather than a requirement. Glass contaminates other recyclables. I saw an article about this today, unfortunately out of North Carolina. Our position on this is single stream, where all the materials are in the bin together, everything's contaminating each other. Sometimes glass gets a bad name or a black eye as the culprit, but for us, we think proper layout, sequencing, something like Rumpke's setup, where they're removing glass from the beginning and they're really made the investment to have high quality glass coming out of their MRF. All those materials are still seeing the value that they should. Glass cannot be recycled due to China's sword policy. This is another one that I've seen recently this week. In fact, we had a TikTok about glass recycling. So if you check that out, there's a lot of comments about, oh, all that glass just goes to Asia. All that glass just goes to China. Glass is domestic. It's recycled domestically. It's heavy. It can only travel so far. There are end markets. There is demand here. There is no reason for us to send any glass to China ever. Glass has no value, belongs in the landfill, or the value of glass has gone down. This one breaks my heart, but glass has value. This is something we're fighting every day. It's really comes down to the quality, like Scott talked about and Ben touched on, is if there's more glass in the pile, it's worth more because it's glass. If there's trash in the pile, instead of just passing those costs on down the line, it's one of those things you have to offset by what you're going to pay for and where it's traveling and all of those kind of economics that go into it. But glass itself is more valuable than ever. You know, it's pretty stable commodity in the stream, unlike some other materials that you'll see in single stream. Finally, there are no end markets for glass. I think we've covered this one sufficiently, but just to reiterate, there are end markets. In fact, in several areas of the US, we need more glass. In fact, we are hand to mouth. We need more glass into our facilities. The Southeast is one. We're bringing glass in from other states to try to meet end market demand. And we've got customers that we're meeting end market demand and still want more. So it's one of those things that there are end markets. It's just regional variables that will depend on how far the glass can travel, what the price of landfill is, all of those things that go into it, how clean the glass is. But those are some of the common myths. I'd love to hear any other myths or questions that you might have in the chat box. You can use the Q&A, you could use the actual chat, and happy to address those or kind of go through whatever your challenges you're having with glass. And I think that's my final slide. So Bob, I think I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Laura. My name is Bob Hippert. I am the sustainability strategy leader for OI or OI Glass. With a I guess my concentration is more on the manufacturing side of the business. So really applying the glass that we receive from the likes of Rumpke and the likes of SMI to our process. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I guess my first thing is, we love glass at OI. I mean, there's no question. We are passionate. It's our only product that we make. Every day, our plants are pumping out glass containers to end up into our customers, which ultimately end up on the store shelves for the consumer to buy. And at OI, we're really proud to be one of the leading producers of glass bottles and jars around the globe. Really, we want to be the most innovative producer of rigid packaging out there today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So if you can see here, I think Scott talked about kind of the glass manufacturing facilities that are out there in the US and Canada today. There's over 40 sites strictly around the glass container business. We've got 18 of those facilities in the US and Canada. So we're a big player. And as Laura mentioned, it's a very important ingredient to our process. It's a key raw material that we need in our streams, and we're going to talk a little bit more why that's important. So this is an example of our sustainability goals. This aligns very closely with what Scott talked about earlier, where the container market is really tried to align itself on goals for our end markets, right? So we've increased our recycled content goal up to 50% by 2030. Just to give you an idea of where we are today, we're closer to about 37%. So we've got a big gap to close. And it's not just on the collection side and the beneficiation side, right? So there's a lot of things that need to change in order for us to hit that target. So, and it's not just about, the energy and the cullet use that we have. You can see we talk about water reductions and our journey to zero waste, but it's also the social impact that we're trying to have, make some positive strides on, and around diversity inclusion as well. I mean, we're invested for the long term. Our company wants to be here for another 100 years. We're a company that's been around for over 100 years, and glass containers, as we've heard earlier in these discussions, It's a very sustainable package. It's the most recyclable package out there. It's an infinitely recyclable. So just keep that in mind. You know, glass is never trash, as we like to put it. So really it's around the demand for cleaner cullet. And Laura talked about a little bit about this earlier. So it's, you know, glass is really the perfect material for the circular economy. She showed it very clearly. You can take a container, drop it in a deposit box or your curbside material, have it beneficiated, cleaned up, sent to me, ultimately as a furnace ready material. Then we introduce that material into our furnaces. We do this every day. There's big benefits by using more and more cullet. We've got the greenhouse gas emissions that we realize for every ton of cullet used. But it's not just the cullet itself, right? So it reduces our raw material consumption. So we're using less limestone, less sand, less soda ash. So these are materials that are mined out of the ground. But it also helps us reduce our energy inputs. So by using cullet, we need less energy to actually melt the glass that we're producing. And that in turn really makes us a very sustainable operation moving forward. You know, consumers continue to look for recycled content, and this is great. I mean, we want to see this push. We want the consumer to come back, and we want to see them actively engaged in the recycled market. Because with the push for the consumer, there's going to be changes in the industry. And again, the more we can do to promote the benefits of glass, I think the larger impact we're going to have on the consumer. So this FMCG, this is more the fast moving consumer goods. They're setting really bold goals for recycled content. So it's not just the likes of OI, it's our customers. So it's the Diageos, it's the Molson Coors. They've got very ambitious goals for where they want to be for the products that they put out on the market. So they're looking to us to help provide that solution. And we're looking to the SMIs and the collections and really governments to help provide the increased collection. So ultimately we can get that reuse of good furnace ready cullet back to our facilities. So I already talked about our container manufacturers. We've set that goal of 50% target by 2030. That's only 9 years away. Just, you know, put that into context. It's not very long. And that's going to require close to 2.5 million tons to be collected and processed, in addition to what's already available on the market today. So it's a tremendous amount of material and glass that we need ultimately to hit these goals. And again, these goals aren't just for an OI or an RDA or an anchor. This is really being pushed from above. So it's from our customers. So the Anheuser-Busch effort to try to attack this. Next slide, please.
I think that was your last slide.
That was it? Oh, perfect. my bad, my mistake. So anyway, I guess my end point will be is there's really no lack of demand for the glass. I would ask you to get creative when you're thinking about glass recycling collection, glass recycling deliveries back to municipalities. We really need to get more furnace ready material back to our facilities in order to hit our ambitious goals for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you to all of our panelists. This has been, as always, an educational process for me, and I hope for our attendees today as well. Bob, I'm going to lead off with you in 1 second, but you used the word beneficiation, which I did not know before I tried to plan this webinar. And so I kind of want to throw it to Laura because I'm testing myself. Is that what you do, Laura, beneficiation? And if so, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and anybody's welcome to jump in after me too. I mean, I think it's a pretty broad term. I think anytime we say beneficial reuse or beneficial use, but sometimes that is only referring to certain markets, whereas otherwise we call it recycling. So for us, we kind of distinguish between the two, but either way, the glass is being beneficiated. But yeah, Scott, maybe you've got a couple of comments, because we talk recycling and going back into bottle, whereas beneficial reuse would be lower value use where it could potentially be end of life, but still not landfill. Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think people use it as a way to describe cleaning up the glass for secondary markets. Beneficial use is anything, doesn't necessarily have to be bottle to bottle or bottle to fiberglass. There's other beneficial use end markets for recycled glass. Strategic materials cleans up the glass, processes the glass. A lot of people use beneficiation and processing, almost interchangeably. Rumpke, in a sense, is also beneficiating the glass at the end of their process, not necessarily during the normal MRF handling, but then when you start to clean up the glass afterwards for secondary market use. That's what.
Got it.
Scott, if I could just add to your discussion, I kind of hit the MRF side of this. Rumpke is kind of unusual. Obviously, we're in the MRF business. And so, Jubi, MRFs of today, when they handle glass, there needs to be a cleanup process prior to sending material to strategic materials or to Rumpke. So we're cleaning that glass, and I tried to make an analogy with paper. With paper coming in, MRFs will have optical sorters to remove non-paper materials. Well, glass is a real challenge, and it requires a deep dive. And the process that Rumpke has, that Strategic Materials has, is the parameters that a Johns Manville require on fiberglass, or the parameters that Bob's group require, call for a pretty significant operation. I think the facility that Rumpke has in Dayton, I'm thinking maybe $8 to $10 million operation. And we process in that Midwest footprint about 5,000 tons a month of material.
Wow.
Glass.
Yeah. We have about 17 minutes left, so I want to remind everyone that if you have a question, please put it in the chat. And if we don't get to it today, we will make sure to follow up with you afterwards. That said, I want to jump into two things because we received so many questions in advance about these two things, and I'm going to name them now so that everybody on the panel knows. Markets and best practices largely at curbside or prior to the process of you all. So if we start with markets, Bob, we can start with you, but obviously everybody can weigh in. I'm starting with you because I sense you're part of the market. So you articulated very clearly that there is a corporate responsibility motive for what you're doing. But now it made me wonder, are you also saying that we need glass? There is a market for glass from a profit perspective. I'm wondering if that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's kind of both, Jubi. I think there's a way that you can really from a corporate standpoint, we have to be good stewards with the materials we're using. I mean, at the end of the day, we talked about the infinitely recyclability and the circularity of glass. So it's our responsibility, knowing that we're producing this material, to try to get it back and reuse it and not have it go to landfills. I mean, it's the right thing to do. Yeah, I mean, of course, we're all here to be profitable. So I'd be lying if I said we weren't looking at the cost. And there are challenges. There are challenges to cost with moving this material long distances. With the weight of the material, it can be economically, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But we try to do everything we can to find out creative solutions to do that. Again, anything we can do to eliminate glass going in the landfill is really our goal.
Cool. Did anybody else want to weigh in on that question? And just know I asked it because I had this sense from what you were saying that yes, we can make this move towards a profitability. Of course, absolutely, environmental stewardship is vital, but this is a business and we're telling you there's a market. Because my sense has been from the folks I talk to, when we opt out or when folks opt out or think about opting out, they tell themselves, well, there isn't much of a market. And so whatever we can do today to dispel that myth is useful, I think. I see you unmuted, Scott, so I think maybe you're going to jump in.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say they may be being told that there's no market for glass or that nobody wants to buy their glass. I mean, I've come across this in very specific instances in certain municipalities and states, right? When there's a container plant in the next county or a processing facility in the next county or a fiberglass facility in the same county as the county was being told that there was no market for the glass. And that really goes back to one of the first points I was making, and I saw a question in the chat about that I think relates back to quality, right? So if you think of the glass as that pile that's just one step away from your residual to the landfill, then the glass commodity may have a negative price because you're trying to move the tons of that material away. And then after the glass processing happens, the rest of the residual still has to be dealt with, just as if you were sending it directly to landfill in the first place. The cleaner we can get the glass, the higher the percentage of glass that's moving in a trip, the more economic it is and the further it can go to end markets. But certainly a lot of times what we see happening is there are some companies that for business decisions have said, maybe they were hit by China's national sword, right? We haven't gotten into the whole China national sword too much here, but we keep hearing it every once in a while that it's, about glass. Glass was never sent to China for recycling, as Laura said. It's a domestic thing. Now, sometimes in your mixed commodity contract bale, if the price of plastic or the price of cardboard or the price of some of the other commodities dipped during China's national sword or during the past couple of years of economic, then you're left with a profile of tons that you need to figure out how to pay for, right? If the facility doesn't want to invest in the proper equipment, and there's a couple, Rumpke's got the best equipment, as far as the MRF goes for processing the glass, and Laura and Strategic Materials gets in glass from a lot of different companies. But there are some companies that don't even have a glass breaker or a basic trommel, or haven't really invested in their physical plant at that MRF in quite some time. We'd start with an audit. We'd recommend an audit in our paper. You want to look at your contract prices and just make sure that quality is 50-50. If I was a farmer and I was delivering a ton of potatoes and only half of the ton was actually potatoes and the other half was dirt, do you think that the ORIDA would, they're probably going to send the dirt back to me, right? They don't need the dirt.
I sure
They
hope
just
they
need the
will.
potatoes, right? So, if a half of that truck is not glass, you're really just paying to move them, the residual material, around the country.
But let's pick up there. Oh, sorry. Was somebody going to say something?
I was just going to say, and Laura brought this up, and Scott, you reinforced it. I think that in areas where there are MRFs providing single stream service, I want to encourage the municipalities, the leaders, political leaders, there are grants available to upgrade MRFs to better handle glass. And it's out there. And I brought that ODNR, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, up because, that's doable. It's doable to put a retrofit Jubi on those plants.
I am very glad you brought that up, because where Scott was leaving off and where you continued speaks to the quality of the product that this circular economy receives. And it sounds like, Bob, you and Scott are part of what you're saying is what the MRFs are outfitted to do matters. And as we know, some municipalities own MRFs, a lot don't. So what does that mean for quality? Obviously, we have to think about education and getting a non-contaminated product at curbside, ideally. So that's part of it, right? So whatever best practices you can speak to about that is great. But also, What I think I'm hearing and what I think I'm learning is how the MRFs are outfitted will impact that as well. If a municipality, for example, does not own their MRF? Is that a policy issue then? Is that an advocacy issue? Is that a contract issue? How do we speak to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can go back to the map. My initial map, I don't know if I can talk through it. If Marissa can pull the map back up, but quality issues and standards are definitely something that will help, right? So as a part of the Glass Recycling Coalition, one of the things that we've done is create, using ISRI standards for output that most all of the MRF operators will know about at some point. Created a glass certificate, a certification program for glass recycling. Rumpke is certainly, the red stars on this map are the GRC certified MRFs that are handling glass and producing good quality market material. It can be done. The Rumpke facilities in Ohio, the Sims facilities in New Jersey, New York, and a couple of facilities in FCC that has the new MRFs in Houston and Dallas, Balcones and Sedona in Arizona, are all certified already. Any MRF and any, can go through this process, submit the audit material and send some material in for review. It's all confidential, and it will also help, make recommendations about what needs to be done to clean up the material and get it to a certain grade. That grade of glass should have a positive market commodity value, right? Period. And so it definitely improves the economics of moving the material from point A to point B. One other thing that I like to raise, Jubi, is we understand the position that communities are in, and there's a little bit of work that needs to be done from a policy perspective to help localities deal with the issue. They bear a responsibility on the collection side, then the material moves over through a contract to maybe they operate their own MRF, but most don't. But through a contract, somebody's obligated to take that material and things of that nature. You want to make sure that the provisions in that contract are benefiting the municipality. We would argue also that in many instances, communities should be working together. Solid waste districts, states can help communities work together through solid waste districts to get economies of scale, so that each county or each city is not moving their material, to processing or to an end market, but collectively they can work together on a contract for the entire metro area, or a set of communities that can work together that has enough material to feed one of these facilities. As you notice, there's not facilities everywhere, right? And so there are, regional, some people call them MRF sheds, Jubi, like, what's the service territory served by a particular facility? That MRF shed should be, working off similar contract terms, right? And we can understand where, a small community in upstate Michigan might get caught that they have to travel their material all the way to Detroit or Chicago to get it to an end market, where we could collectively be working to aggregate material and shorten the distance, that any one jurisdiction has to move its material from point to point, right? And those are some of the things that we're studying and that we're working on. So there are policy issues at the state level that are necessary to help municipalities and counties be more efficient with their tax dollars.
And thank you for bringing that, because one of the things I'm realizing how little time we have. We should have planned 17. We could have a summit just on this.
We'll come back and we'll do it again if you want to.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think there's way more to answer. We've got a lot of location-specific questions. Yep. So again, I encourage you. I'm going to make sure that the questions asked in advance get to our panelists. But if you have questions as we're wrapping up, I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to put them in there. As we move towards closing, I'm going to ask for just final comments from everyone. But also, Scott, you and I, when we first started talking about this, you made it clear that GPI is willing to have conversations with communities that are feeling challenged about how to maintain their glass recycling programs. and help them if possible, because we can't solve everything, maybe, but at least begin the conversations about how can we think about addressing this in a way that is not as burdensome on your community.
Absolutely. The entire glass industry, GPI, we're, one trade association that works within the Glass Recycling Coalition. The coalition comes together and really can bring these, innovative solutions and dialogue together. We have been working with communities across the country to at least understand the problem, get in, turn it over a little bit, and come up with some solutions. We've solved some very unique, problems in the past several months, to get material and keep it away from landfill. And we're studying some different options that are necessary. But the solutions in the Northeast are going to be very different than the solutions in New Mexico or Alaska, or South Florida. It really is, if there's a proximity to market, 100, 150 miles, maybe 200 miles, that should be able to get to a plant, economically, right? Maybe we need to do some cleanup. Maybe the industry will come together and work with other material groups. I am part of the recycling partnership as well, and we're all in the bin together is the motto there. And many of the other material groups are studying investments that they need to make in MRFs as well to get more material out of the single stream system. There are alternatives that work, and we can show those models and help provide the engineering and consulting support to study the econometrics that are necessary to help keep glass in the stream in different communities across the country.
Wonderful. Did anybody else want to weigh in?
I'll just echo Bob's thoughts. My key takeaway always is glass does not belong in the landfill. So one thing that you'll see, or maybe have already seen, is don't trash glass, and that's the only takeaway. So if you're looking for solutions, if you've had challenges in the past, if you want something reevaluated, I know that there were a couple questions around pricing and seeing if things have changed in the market. If options have changed, we're happy to help, at least have the discussion and see what's possible. Many times, if we can't help as Strategic Materials, we'll lean on our GRC members, the Glass Recycling Coalition, or the Glass Recycling Foundation. And many times we will refer them on to somebody who can help. So even if we're not the solution, we can usually put you in touch with somebody who can be. So feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate how much you all have put yourselves out there in terms of saying, we want to help solve this problem. So I'm going to hold all of you to that. Scott, Laura, et cetera, y'all are going to be getting a lot of emails, I bet. So I'm just saying, you said you signed up for it. As we close out, one more opportunity for us to capture the kinds of questions and concerns you, our audience, our constituents have. So we're asking this final question, and this one is not limited by words. So we are thinking of asking, what do you think is the greatest need for glass recycling? And you can answer that in any way you want. I already see that somebody has answered creativity. And that is a broad answer. That could mean a lot, but I think, and one of the things I think is wonderful is I think our panelists have spoken to that. Education, investment, these are all topics that have come up during our webinar. We need to invest in infrastructure to make sure it's done. Transportation options, I see. Grants, passion, and care. Oh, these are some brilliant answers y'all are coming up with, really. Recycling mandates. Our parent organization is the Conference of Mayors, and one of the things we're always thinking about is the extent to which policy options help move things forward. And we spoke a little bit to that today. Consistent and accurate messaging and education. State support. We are the Conference of Mayors. We do represent local governments, and we 100% agree with that. End markets in the South, that's specific to that area. We need okay, I'm going to read this whole thing. We need a strong local market development push that goes beyond the 15-second sound bites. Boom. That's all I'll say there. Boom. Agreed. And I think these folks here agree with you. regional watershed collaboration. It's something Scott touched on and other folks, and I think that's important as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing these answers. We have captured them. Again, if you've asked questions, we're going to make sure you get answers to them. We're also going to make sure that if you have questions later, you can email us. I will make sure to put my email address in the chat so that you have it. As we close out, let me thank our panelists, Scott, Bob, Ben, and Laura, and our sponsors, the Glass Recycling Coalition and Renew. And I want to let you know that what we do here is education. We have a fall summit coming up. I'm going to send, like I said, my email. If you want to make sure you keep getting news from us, if you haven't before, email me directly and I'll put you on our distribution list, and you can learn about the upcoming fall summit we're having in Austin in person. We're actually going to be trying to do a combination in-person virtual because we have learned the capacity of virtual like this. So stay tuned. Thank you, everybody. Obviously, we have more to talk about. We're going to talk about glass in Austin and beyond Austin. So stay tuned. Let's get back to work. Bye, everybody.